Hello, we're going to be doing Chinese brush painting. Japanese brush painting, Chinese brush painting are both the same techniques. Japanese, of course, developed from the original Chinese brush painting, but we're going to be working on brush painting techniques today. So I'm going to start with some of the materials and things that you are going to need to do this. The first thought is paper. I like to use newsprint for practice paper because rice paper is not as forgiving. If it gets too wet, you're going to end up with a hole in your paper. But when you are first beginning, the newsprint is very forgiving. So we're going to be using newspaper print. I also have to have brushes, water, and our charcoal paint. It's not really paint, it's actually charcoal that's mixed with water. And that is what they are using, although black paint, if it's the right type of black paint, can sometimes work as a substitute. But if you have the charcoal, that's the best to use. So I'm going to start off with showing you Grace's kit, because she's going to join us here in a few minutes. But this is Grace's kit. I'm going to explain what the different parts of it are. This is a little ceramic bowl. They will use color and that are more like rocks. You are probably used to seeing watercolor paints coming in either a tube like this or in a tray. And the traditional way of coloring is using what looks like little rocks. And these rocks will go into the little ceramic bowl. And when you are using your brush, you put the water on there, and that's the way that you would use this particular ceramic bowl for your color. So you can see that there are different colors with different, some of them look like rocks, some look like little tiny mosaic tiles, but this is actually color, yellows and reds, oranges. Anyway, they come as not in a tube and not as a little square in a regular palette, but as what look like rocks. That's traditional. This part of your kit is to hold your brushes when you're using them so that you aren't getting your surface all wet and you're not endangering misshaping your brush, because you don't want to break any of the hairs in your brush. You want it to stay as close to it as you see it now as you can possibly do it. So we treat our brushes very gently, and you will put them to rest on this ceramic. It's meant to hold the brushes. This part of your kit would be charcoal. It has a lid, so it doesn't make a mess inside, but you would put some water on that. In the center, you have the charcoal and have that. This is a stamp that you would use when your pictures are finished as a way of identifying it. And some of you might have a stamp that will represent your name. It's always stamped in red. Red is a good luck color, so it's a good thing to have on there. And I know Grace's one ordered, so she doesn't have it yet, but she will probably be getting it before we know it. This is liquid charcoal, and you find this interesting story. I'm going to throw this in there real quick. The first time I went to a store to purchase the actual charcoal, it wasn't available in our local art store. So a friend of mine told me I'll have to go to a Chinese grocery store. I did, but it was really interesting because the ink wasn't where I thought it would be. It was actually in the pharmacy section. So I had to go and ask them in their pharmacy section, but their pharmacy section doesn't look anything like ours. It was drawers full of different herbs. So if you do need to get it, you can find it in a Chinese grocery store quite often. These are the brushes. They have a plastic tube on them to protect them. Right now, that'll obviously have to come off. Oftentimes they are dipped so that to make transporting them and shipping easier, you'll want to soak the brush because it has like a starch on it that keeps it together when it's being shipped. So you'll need to soak these brushes before you use them. Make sure all of that's out so that you have the most flexibility possible with your brushes. Okay, that takes care of that. So this is my newsprint. I'm going to go on to the brushes and the proper way to hold the brushes. First of all, I have different size brushes here. These two are very good for leaves, like on chrysanthemums when we get to that point. This one is good for making the smaller petals on a chrysanthemum flower. This one is very good for very fine lines that you might want to use with some of your things, but I find the brush I use the most often is this particular size right here. This is very versatile. Everything is done by the amount of pressure on the brush. You don't want to hold it like a pencil. You want to hold it, thumb and fingers, at a 90-degree angle. You want to have it perpendicular to your paper, so it's straight up and down to your paper. You're using your arm, not your wrist, but your whole arm will give you a lot more control over the pressure on the brush, and that will help you with getting the right spread on your brush for things like fine lines, or in the case of bamboo, for the stalk. So I am going to go ahead and start then with, this is just dipped in water. There's a little bit of it in here. You're going to straight up and down. You're going to put a little bit of pressure on it. You widen it out. It's probably about a half an inch or a quarter of an inch. And then as you are putting your brush down to the paper, and when you get to the end of the first joint in bamboo, you pull it back towards yourself and it's going to make a little puddle on the paper. So I'm going to show you that one again. So this is a little more paint in there. The charcoal, or in this case, ink, paint, whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter. It all depends on the amount of water as to whether it's gray to dark black. So if I want to have a darker one, I do in here. And then gradually pull the pressure off and pull it back towards yourself, and it makes a puddle right at the joint. The size of the joints, I would say they're probably about 5, maybe 6 inches. You don't want to make them too short. You want to make sure that when you're doing this, that you're going to have a nice straight back towards you, and then pull it up. And that will make where the joint goes. I'm going to continue with making the next joint. You're going to have a little space. And then you're going to start it, a little bit of a space there. Pressure up, pull it back towards you, and it makes the puddle. So it's going to have a little space. Pressure up, pull it back towards you, and it makes a little bit of a puddle right at the joint. So I think we could probably maybe start with Grace, if you want to come over, we can do some practice just doing the first part of this. So if you want to use one of my brushes, that's fine. You might, if you want to use this one, and I'll use this one. Okay. So I'm going to practice over here. You can see behind me that I have the bamboo, and you can see how it gets a little darker at the very end where I pulled it back over. So let's dip in here, and there's Not a problem if you make a mistake, because these are all practice, and that's why we use newsprint. Don't be afraid to try it. Paper, put your brush to the paper and pull it back towards yourself. Okay, then a space. And back towards yourself. And then a space. If you feel like your brush is getting dry, don't be afraid to dip it back in, because we don't want to break the hairs. That would be the worst thing. Then we lose all our control over how fine the lines are. So, and bamboo, notice, does not always grow straight. So you can practice doing it at angles also. Here. So I'm going to go at a diagonal. You're doing great. So you can practice that as much as you want to. You can pause this if you need to spend some more time on just doing this part of it until you feel like you've mastered enough that you want to go to the next step. I'm going to show you how to do the joints. If you notice on here, the joints, it's almost like, it's not really a letter U, but it starts at the bottom of the one. Here is at this bottom. It starts here, it goes here, and then up and out. So it's almost, practice just doing that part. And you're doing it at the bottom. And that's where the joints will end up being, right at the bottom. Okay. We'll do a couple more here. Now, if you look at this, you're going to see that the leaves all are growing down, and you have the branches are very thin little lines, and they are growing out of the joint. So the joint is right here. It grows out of either side of the joint. So you just make sure your brush is to a point. They are not curved though, they're angular. I oftentimes have students that don't seem to like that. They like to make things look less than the angle. That's the way it's done. It's just an angle. And the less pressure, the finer the line. It does not grow out of the middle. It grows from the joint. So whatever you're doing, it can grow on either side. I've just made some big fat lines, too much pressure. If I want a finer line, barely touch the paper. You do very nice fine lines, better than I'm doing at the moment, I'm afraid. Some that can get quite wide. You can see the difference. If you put too much pressure on, it gets quite a bit wider. So you barely touch the paper to make the thin. Now, the interesting thing with the leaves, they're all going to grow down, and you're going to start at the beginning right here with one of the branches, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they grow in clusters. So to make, in this case, we'll start where it joins the branch, and then we're going to put pressure on it so that it's wider. Then we're going to gradually pull the pressure off, and it gets thinner when you get to the bottom. So making the bamboo leaves can be a bit of a challenge. You start, put pressure to widen that, then gradually pull the pressure off, and it goes to a point. You might want to make them a little bit longer and gradually pull that off so that it goes to a point. And they grow in clusters. So I'm going to do another one here. I'm going to pull up. And there's, so then we have 2. Here's 3. But they all grow towards the ground. You do not want to have them growing up this way because that's not how it is in nature for bamboo. If you're getting creative, I guess, for some other reason, and you do that, it's fine. But for bamboo, gravity pulls the leaves down. That's not a good one on my part. Pressure doesn't, it all is in the amount of pressure that you have on your brush. Probably these are about 6 inches, just like the stalk was. So I don't want to make them too short. And that's okay for something to be going on the page. Nice job. I have to turn it over to you. You're doing better than I am at the moment, in my personal opinion. Just keep doing that. And then if you want to start over for any reason, you can get another piece of paper. See some examples here. 4 to 5, but all coming off of a branch. To paper. This is over in they're very angular looking, so it's like a U. There. This is an example of, let's see how the branches go off. And it goes to a point, so you go wide, lift it up, and you get it back down to its fine point. another piece of paper. So this actually, if you study brush painting in Japan or China in particular, you'll spend years just making bamboo using the charcoal, no color. It's like quite the graduation to go from just doing bamboo to doing lotus. Once you've sufficiently mastered this, then they let you move on to the lotus leaf and lotus flowers and then chrysanthemums. And then after you've mastered that long enough, they go into color. So it takes a while. They're very patient people. And you can do, they kind of out an angle too. You can do any part of this, just practice on paper. You don't even have to make it look like bamboo. Just practice the leaves. Up. Or practice. Almost looks like birch trees right now. It makes me think of that. Is there bamboo? Yeah. All right. There you go. That's somewhere. They grow in clusters of 4 and 5. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which we have. This is one page that's just practicing. When you get really good, see there, it starts off, there's like a little there. used to love doing this because you can sit there and for hours end up just doing. It takes a lot of focus to be able to do this, and for whatever reason, it's really easy to put your attention there, and you just keep going and get very calm. Okay. All right, so I guess I'm going to go ahead and just do a summary of what we did today. We started with introducing all of the materials and supplies that you might need to be doing this. I then did a quick demonstration of the proper way to hold the brush, which is not like a pencil, but thumb, fingers straight up and down where you're using shoulder. You don't want to use wrist only, use your shoulder. So once you have mastered that part of it, then you can start doing things as like the bamboo, which is a simple line. It's all about the pressure on the paper and pulling back towards you so that you have your joints. Then you have the very simple technique at the joint. At the bottom of the joint, you will have, it's almost a U shape. And from that, the branches, very light touch to make a very thin line for the branches. They are angular. So think about that as you're doing it. They're very angular. And then when you get to the leaves, they come in clusters of 4 and 5. And it's all the pressure to, you start with a point, it widens, pull the pressure off, and your brush should go back to a fine point, and that's how it ends. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this part of it. That, I think, pretty well sums it up. Do you have any questions, that something that I failed to say or confuse you with?
I think you said it all good.
Okay.
For teaching.
Okay, all right. Then I think we can probably go ahead and stop, and just hope everyone has fun doing this. I used to use this particular lesson plan with my students. I will give you I'll give you a place that you can go to and watch a really good person that started at 2.5 years old, and she's a master painter. So I'll pass that information along. You can go watch her on YouTube. So thank you, Grace, for helping me demonstrate this, and I hope that everyone enjoys what they're doing. I particularly like it, and so hopefully you will like it as much as I have, so we can, so much more to learn. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great.
Oh my God, that was good.